This is Kim Smith coming to you live on Facebook from Adventures in Coaching, my company here. And I'm going to talk today about emotional intelligence. And that's a really very meaty topic with a lot of things to talk about. And I'm going to really focus on the self awareness and sort of self control piece of that. So I'm going to start by asking everyone if, do you feel like you're ever being hijacked by your emotions? And what I mean by this is that maybe you don't feel like you have control over your emotions or your reactions, or really what happens, how you react when things happen to you. Or maybe you're in an argument or something happens at work and you just feel yourself like kind of flying off the handle or not really being able to think through what you want to say and how you want to respond. So reacting to things is really a part of being human, of course. But often what happens is we get into a pattern where we're overreacting and it can really feel terrible. And it's also very destructive to your life and your relationships. It can just really get in the way of things, especially if you don't, really understand why this is happening. And you really see it all the time. There's arguments over politics. Look at road rage, for example. I mean, that's something that happens in a split second, and somebody's just suddenly so angry and reacting, and they don't really think through the consequences. That could be a really there something could really terrible happen as a result of that. So that's one example. Another is, of course, on social media. You see it all the time. But for the sake of this conversation, I really wanted to talk about, what happens to you personally, in your personal relationships or at work with, your partners, your families. What if you could actually have more control over your emotions and how you react when the going gets tough? And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. And once you become aware of the triggers, so to speak, that are driving your emotions and the reactions that you experience, you begin to have a choice as to how you react. That's really good news, right? So, how do you identify what these triggers might be? And I guess basically think about like the next time something happens and you react in a negative way, try to think about all those underlying feelings. Is it shame that's coming up? Is it fear, self-doubt? Maybe you feel like running away or jumping in and fighting. Do you shut down or do you get loud? And these are all emotional signs that you're reacting to something, most likely below the surface. So, what can you do? Well, emotional intelligence is really made up of three parts: self awareness, self control, and social awareness. I'm not going to talk too much about that social awareness piece today, maybe another time, but I really wanted to focus on the self awareness part. And that is really the first and most critical piece. Because if you don't know why you're reacting, how can you control it? And this is where I think some of the books out there on emotional intelligence fall short. And this is also where I do a lot of work with my coaching clients. So, I'm going to talk about a few strategies of how to become aware of what might be driving, that reaction piece, and how do you become more self-aware. So think about a time when you had a reaction or an overreaction basically to something. When you just, reacted to something and wondered how did that happen? Why did I just get so angry, or why did I react that way? I wish I could have done that differently. So work backwards and think about what's really going on. Are you or were you really angry about what that person said? Maybe you are, and maybe that person was in the wrong, but but did you have to react that strongly to that? So thinking about what might be beneath that reaction, what might you be afraid of? That's a great question. Are you afraid of not being heard, of maybe not being right, or maybe ultimately you're afraid of losing that relationship? Maybe you're afraid of looking stupid, or feeling less than, or really doubting yourself. And those are all, I mean, there's many things that can come up for different people, but those are some of the very, very common ones. And then think back to a time from your childhood when this might have also happened to you. What happened to you then, and what reaction did you have? Did you feel fear as a kid? Did you feel like maybe you weren't being heard? And did this continue to happen to you as you were growing up? And that's where we start seeing some patterns, like something that happened in childhood that we just held on to. And that's a defense mechanism because we were trying to, get heard as a child when maybe the adult dismissed us, or maybe the adult overreacted and became very angry and we got defensive and fearful and really shut down. And now as adults, when this happens, we also get triggered. We still get triggered and we react in a way that is maybe more an overreaction than a reaction where you say, oh gosh, well, that's really not that big a deal. Do I really need to react this way? So that's why you want to kind of go back to, if you can think about that original time that something happened, and start working around the awareness of what happened then and how that's manifesting in your life now. So like I said, what might seem as a defense mechanism as a kid becomes a problem as an adult. And those reactions that you're having may be really getting in the way of having a successful relationship at home and with your friends and coworkers. So part of that, part of becoming aware and self-aware is healing that original wound. And once you're really aware of this, it's much easier to control your reactions. It's going to take a lot of practice. I'm not going to lie there, but you can change the pattern. And, I also challenge you to sort of pause when this starts happening. If something is happening to you, you're now aware of maybe where it came from, but instead of reacting the next time somebody is really triggering you, just sort of pause in the moment and say, like, hey, what is this really about? Can I react differently? And one of the ways that you might, react differently is to get curious. So pause and then get curious about, what that is that somebody's actually saying to you. What is it that's triggering you? And you can even say to that person, like, hey, I hear you and I want to learn more or understand more about where they're coming from. And just kind of open the conversation that way, so that maybe you have an opportunity to hear things in a different way versus through that filter that you've always heard it through, that you're really unaware of. Now you're becoming more aware of that, so you can start thinking about a different way to process the information. I love this, just get curious. So another aspect of self-awareness that I have found extremely helpful is meditation. And it is one of those things that's pretty personal. I mean, there's so many different ways to meditate out there, and there's so many books. So I really recommend, finding out what works for you. And I will say that mindfulness meditation practices are really being used throughout schools right now, and all over the place, to help people with their reactions, especially children. They're finding it's working really well with helping overreactive kids to help control their emotions. And it really works, and it's worth digging into. And like I said, there are a lot of books out there, but really what it does is it helps you to really have a quiet space and quiet time to sit with yourself and feel some of the feelings that might come up around certain things, and to acknowledge them, and to, thank them for being there, for protecting you maybe for all of these years, but also to say, hey, I don't necessarily need you there at the ready all the time anymore. So the meditation piece is really key. Journaling can also be extremely helpful when you're trying to work on self-awareness. So, once that awareness is there, you've done a lot of work, you've been digging in, you're trying to figure out what this original piece is. You now have a choice to, as to how you react to a situation. And like I was saying before, really being able to sort of pause rather than just jumping right in without any thought about it. It doesn't mean that you don't counter. That doesn't mean that you don't stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't set boundaries, but it means that you are able to do it in a way that you feel that you have control over how you are reacting. And therefore you're no longer feeling like hijacked, like you have no choice in how you're reacting. And I think that's where people get so confused sometimes, like, where did this come from? Why did I react that way? And with, growing your emotional intelligence and working on self-awareness and self-control, you now have choices as to how you react and put yourself out there. And it's amazing how it will help your relationships, if you are a leader and a manager at work, it's amazing how, if you come at things with a different approach of, trying to be curious about why people are maybe not meeting their goals or struggling, or maybe they're upset at something, rather than just saying, well, too bad, this is just the way it is. You'll be amazed to see, how much you can learn about your reactions, but also how through understanding the emotions and maybe reactions of others can help you have a much better team and a lot more success. So, and that goes for your relationships at home, like I said, with your family, your husband, your spouse, your wife, whatever. It's really an amazing process, but it does, it takes time, and once you're aware of this, it's not just all of a sudden it just stops and everything's perfect. Practice, practice, practice. It's really hard to uninstall the triggers, and trust me, even if it's just one person that's really triggering you, and that person goes away or you leave that relationship, until that wound is healed, that original wound, another person just like them will show up in your life again. I guarantee it. Therefore, you have an opportunity to practice again. So, not all is lost, but it's a process. Being human is a process. Self-awareness and self-learning is always a process, but trust me, I know it's very, very well worth it. So if any of this resonated for you, I would love to hear what you're working on or struggling with as it relates to your emotions, and how it's affecting and how they're affecting your life, or anything else you'd like to talk about. So please reach out to me either on Instant Messenger here on Facebook, or at my website at adventuresincoaching.com. Go to the Work With Me page and let me know a little bit about what's going on with you. And I will, with that, close today's session, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, and thanks for being here. Have a great day.